Welcome back. Teachers and trainers are indispensable carriers of all the developments in education and training. Moreover, they have shown impressive commitment in the context of the recent COVID-19 crisis by making significant efforts to ensure the continuation of the learning process. European teachers and trainers, being the cornerstones of the European education area, have a central role to play in promoting the European dimension of learning and teaching, supporting learners in understanding and experiencing the sense of European identity and belonging. Continuous novelties as well as challenges have an effect not only on the competencies acquired, but also on teachers and trainers' well-being and the attractiveness of the teaching profession. Building on the Council's work on the conclusions on European teachers and trainers for the future and the conclusions on countering the COVID-19 crisis in education and training during Croatia's presidency, this panel is an opportunity to further explore the challenges faced by teachers and trainers, as well as the possible policy responses. I'm Lidija Kralj, and today with us are Jean-Michel Blanquer, Minister of National Education and Youth from the French Republic, Ekström, Minister for Education from the Kingdom of Sweden, Václav Velčovský, Vice Minister of Education, Youth and Sports from the Czech Republic, Themis Christophidou, Director General for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture from the European Commission, and Croatian Minister of Science and Education, Blaženka Divjak. Minister Divjak, would you be so kind to open the panel and tell us how Croatia and the whole European Union can learn from the crisis and use it to stimulate innovation?
Thank you, Lidija, and thank you all of your participants participating also at this panel. In my opening speech today, I have already touched upon the broader context of the panel discussion, to which I have invited fellow ministers and dear colleagues, so Anna, Jean-Michel, Václav, as well as Themis from the Commission. So thank you for participating in this panel. Over last 4 months during our 4 video conferences, the EU Ministers for Education have been discussing pressing issues related to the COVID-19 crisis in very detailed and committed manner. We have been in contact via formal but also informal channels because we have had a need to understand, to discuss, to learn, and wish to support each other. We also, to be honest, only human beings with our doubts, limited capacities at our disposal, but with a strong will to be on the top of our task. And it was scary. Nobody in the recent history had to deal with school closures at such a large scale. COVID-19 crisis forced educational authorities, ministers to make, and also governments to make very difficult decisions, including an adequate organizational and safety measures, widespread closure of schools that was especially painful. Then switch to digital education overnight, organization of assessment, grading and examinations, enrollments, as well as the eventual reopening of educational institutions and the return to face-to-face learning and teaching. So we have had and still have to answer a lot of questions and really take into consideration many factors for this informed decision making. This has been extraordinary test for our education and training system, urging us to quickly explore and roll out different models of distance education, focusing on digital learning and teaching. Looking back at the past months, it's important to consider and understand the lessons learned as the basis for the forward and informed decision-making in the future, as I said. Many actions had been taken as an emergency response in very demanding circumstances, and they are yet to be assessed. It's very important to assess it and find answers for the future. But we need to look at the crisis also as a call to rethink education and training and turn these challenges and problems into opportunities. In this respect, it's important to explore how innovation and technology can be used to find good solutions in support of teaching and learning, solutions that can secure quality and inclusion. quality and inclusion. For example, this crisis can surely confirm how important digital skills are. But even before this crisis, we learned from different studies, such as OECD TALIS study, as Andreas mentioned before, that many teachers and trainers do not feel comfortable with their digital skills, especially when they need to use them while teaching the digital native generation. But it is necessary, and it is actually very interesting to tie this issue with a broader pedagogical approach. Nowadays, we often refer to teachers as a facilitator of learning, and digital tools can be very helpful for teachers and trainers in this respect. It can also lead to innovation in students' assessment, put accent on formative assessment. It's very important. And during this crisis, it was really important to go back and think about what assessment means, and feedback to students, and how to encourage students to learn, not just assess and grade, as sometimes a lot of people and also students and teachers do in schools. And it was also important to develop a personalized learning. And in that respect, I would like to see more collaborative teaching and peer learning among teachers, as Andreas stressed during his presentation. And then, based on Croatian experience in the implementation of digital learning and teaching during the COVID-19 crisis, we managed to appropriately address this, of course, due to the circumstances, because we have been in the middle of curricular reform, a part of which focused on digital transformation and equipping schools, teachers, and students with needed digital infrastructure, tools, but also skills. Therefore, digital transformation of schools that we started in 2017 paid back with interest in this crisis. But at the same time, equally important was within curricular reform during 2 years that we retrained 50,000 teachers and people working in schools, almost entire teachers cohort, and to focus teaching and learning on problem solving, critical thinking, informed decision making. Without this, it would be impossible for students to benefit from distant education, as I hope they did. In that context, feedback given to students and assessment have a crucial role, and having sound assessment methods in place, as well open assessment system available to everybody, remains our priority for the next period. Additionally, we invested in equipping teachers and students with personal equipment, laptops and tablets, as well as providing internet access for everybody. So equity principle is essential, not just during the crisis, but in general in education. But in crisis, it was so visible if we miss somebody, or there are some students and teachers lagging behind. So we need to continue investing in equipment, but also in training and retraining, so that teachers are very prepared to carry out their roles in full capacity, but also support teachers in a way to take care about their well-being, to support their, let's say, not just equipment and retrain them, but give them all sorts of support that they are needed to achieve also not just security, but also this self-assurance that that is important for this really big responsibility. Therefore, we prepared the action plan for distance education for next school year with several delivery models. It is available in English, so I'm not going to describe what we put into the action plan, but we plan to keep schools open and safe, and at the same time to balance it, to turn mostly to blended or hybrid model of learning. And as Pasi said, it is irreversible change, and we need a new mindset about how actually change happens and what are the ingredients and how to support change in a positive way. And giving autonomy to teachers is not enough. Autonomy always comes in pair with responsibility, and for that, teachers need to be prepared and willing to respond to changes. In the ever-changing world, the only constant that remains, if we want to be resilient and lead the change, it is willingness to keep learning. So this willingness to keep learning and enjoyment in learning, it is very important. And in that respect, teachers and trainers are role models for their learners. And we have to teach as we preach. And investing in teaching is investing in the future of their learners. I don't want to take too much time from our respectable panelists, and whom I would like to thank in advance for their contribution. And I'm very excited to hear their thoughts, and will join them in the final messages. So thank you for listening me again at the beginning of this panel. And Lidija, the floor is yours again.
Thank you, Minister Divjak, for interesting overview and emphasizing importance of broader pedagogical approach and preparation of the teachers so they can successfully carry out their role in challenging situation as we had a few months ago. So let's start now with the questions for our panelists. As acknowledged in the Council conclusion, constant social, demographic, cultural, economic, scientific, environmental, and technological changes are transforming the world of education and training. Moreover, this is changing the occupation of teachers and trainings with increasing demands, responsibilities, and expectations put before them. The recent one, teaching under COVID-19 crisis, is yet another such example. Many years from now, I think that 2020 will be probably remembered as a quite exceptional year for our education and training system and for our societies in general, as the year when we changed the ways we socialize, communicating, teaching, and learning. Minister Ekström, let's start with you. When discussing the impact of using digital technologies in education, what are, in your view, the major impacts on teachers, and what are the ways to support teachers, students, and parents?
Well, thank you very much, and let me thank you so much for organizing this conference. I would also like to extend a warm, heartfelt thank you to the Croatian presidency, the European Union Commissioner, and all colleagues. This has been, I had my first job in the 1970s. And I've never been through such a challenging time as this spring. And it has been fantastic to have you as colleagues to discuss with, to be frank and open with, and to learn from. So thank you very much for these opportunities. They have been very, very valuable. As you might know, in the Swedish school systems, we closed down and we went digital for young persons from the age of 15 and upwards, but we kept schools and preschools open. And I would like to share with you some of the experiences we have. One very interesting experience is that for upper secondary, for children or young persons above the age of 15, we saw sometimes in the beginning a decline of attendance, but overall we've seen a bigger attendance than usual. We've seen groups of students who normally have felt reluctant to come to school, who have been feeling uncomfortable in the classroom. They have actually attended in a way that they haven't before. On the other hand, many teachers say that they don't know how many of the students who are active or are present in a digital sense are present in real life. So we see a mixed picture there. When it comes to the compulsory school, children up till the age of 15, we have seen quite a large number of students being absent, which has for us been a big problem. Part of this has been natural. We have had a very strong recommendation to stay at home if you feel even mild symptoms. So both pupils and teachers have been absent to a much larger degree than otherwise, which has been positive. We wanted them to stay at home. So in compulsory school, we introduced blended teaching relatively early, and we have now at least a month and a half of experience of blended learning. And parts of it has been positive. We have seen that, for instance, pupils staying at home with mild symptoms have had the opportunity to keep up with the schoolwork. We have also seen a possibility for teachers who are staying at home with mild symptoms, or even teachers who are above the age of 70. They have been able to teach from their home, which has been seen as 100% positive from both students and teachers' perspective. But we have also negative experiences. For instance, it has been considered extremely negative from the teachers and the teachers' unions that they have felt the need to double work, to both have distance learning, distance teaching, and in classroom teaching at the same time. So they have felt an increase in the workload. And I think when Europe is opening up their schools and looking towards blended learning, this is a warning from the Swedish experience. Make sure that the teachers are not overburdened with a double workload, both digital learning and direct learning and face-to-face learning. And this is something that of course can be organized. You can organize it so that one teacher takes care of the distance learning and another teacher takes care of the on the face-to-face learning, etc., etc. But this is something you have to be aware of. Another aspect is of course the aspect of equity. Sweden is a fairly digitalized country, and our schools we have always said that we have access to digital tools, but not as much access to digital skills and digital competence among teachers and learners. And when it comes to especially upper secondary school, we have seen very clearly that the lack of equity in the school system has been more visible during this very challenging spring. We have seen much more absence from pupils from deprived areas, but we have also seen that pupils in deprived areas often fall behind when it comes to internet connection at home, and also fall behind when it comes to overcrowding. If you live with many siblings in a small apartment, it's much more difficult to follow online learning, of course. So teachers have struggled and students have struggled, but overall we feel that this spring has given us fantastic experiences, and I would like to really take this opportunity to say a warm and heartfelt thank you to the Swedish teachers and the Swedish headmasters and the Swedish, above all the Swedish pupils, for using this very difficult spring to learn as much as they in fact have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Ekström. I completely agree with you that we will have plenty of benefits from this for normal schooling, and that we are all grateful to our teacher for handling such a situation successfully. Vice Minister Velčovský, what impact and support do you recognize in your country?
Well, dear Blaženka, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a really pleasure to be here with you. And congratulations, as Anna already said, to your presidency. I know that it's last 2 days of your presidency. It's last 2 days of the school year. So I think it's the time to make a formative assessment. And I think you succeed in a really excellent way. And we all appreciate your endeavor, your engagement, and your openness. So thank you very much. I may imagine how hard it was, because I was in charge of the first presidency in 2009. So how big challenging this task is. So really, really congratulations. Concerning your question, I'm going to focus on, let's say, 3 areas, and then I would like to stress both positive and negative effects. These areas are teachers, equipment, and social role of education. Concerning the teachers, I would like to really thank the Czech teachers, and I think the teachers all over Europe, for managing this really unprecedented situation. I think the teachers shown their flexibility and dedication. And just for your information, we have made a small, or not small, we have made a survey which came to all the schools, and the ministry tried to gain the information how schools were facing the coronavirus crisis and how they were prepared for digital education. And from this survey, the message was that 40% of teachers were fully independent and were fully okay with the digital competencies, 40%. 55% were okay but needed assistance. It means assistance from other colleagues, assistance from friends, assistance from director, assistance from NGO, and so on and so on. So we have 95% of teachers which were full or almost full accommodated to this crisis situation. And only 5% of teachers were, let's say, out of these digital competencies and out of, let's say, these strands of education which were needed. And I think this is an excellent example. And to be frank, we did not expect such an excellent number because we thought that this, let's say, digital gap between teachers and between pupils will be even higher. From the other side, however, new skills are still needed. We have 140,000 teachers in the Czech Republic, and their further education and further development, not only of the digital technology, but of the usage of this technology in the education process is needed. It means formative assessment, as was already mentioned, new trends in pedagogy, skills for or needs for specific skills pupils in the digital era, and so on and so on. These are new topics which now the teachers are facing and must face. Concerning conditions, we have shown a variety of tools. We have established a specific web page with links to the diverse resources. We have performed a webinar with more than 1,000 participants from teachers, and we have made an excellent collaboration with Czech TV. And there was, on the daily basis, program for elementary schools. So every morning they have tried, in collaboration with us, with the ministry and with top teachers, to perform the tips and to allow even for the pupils without an excellent IT skills and without an IT equipment, the sort of distance education via television. And I think, again, this is something which we have almost forgotten, because it was famous in the 70s and 80s, this TV broadcasting. And now, again, the TV shown its role for further education, and I think it's absolutely great. On the other hand, from our survey, we got the number that 60% of schools need further education, further investments into education infrastructure. It means 2/3 of schools see some, let's say, disproportions or some gaps in the equipment. And this is absolutely, let's say, conditio sine qua non for further development. And I think this is a big challenge for us as the representatives of the government for providing them as much services and as much investments as possible to get the tasks we are asking for. Concerning the social role of education, I would like to mention a side effect, and this is a side effect of parents. Because parents which were home officing from their homes now saw how hard the education process is, how hard it is to educate people, how hard the curricula could be, how hard even their own children might be. And this was the side effect of appreciation of the work of teachers. And I think this side effect should be mentioned as an important byproduct of the coronavirus crisis, and is connected with the role of teachers in education and the prestige of the education profession. On the other hand, the distance education was connected with anxiety and afraid of mental health. And of course, we all as representatives of the government should balance the physical health and the coronavirus crisis and the mental health and the mental role of social education and the effects of social distancing. And this is something which was very hard. It was unprecedented. Let's hope that the next wave of the pandemic will not come. However, if it will come, then we should make this decision again and to say, what is more important, to get a risk or let's say to face these all gaps and these barriers which distant education has. And the last thing concerning the social role, these are social disparities, which I should mention as well. We have identified something about 10,000 pupils without distance education. It means which did not participate on the regular basis on the distance education activities. And this could be because of the social background. This could be because of the insufficient equipment. This could be because of other purposes or other reasons. However, these 10,000 of Czech pupils are quite significant number, and therefore, in the further steps, we should concentrate on impact of distance education on social disparities and to overcome them and not to make them even deeper. And I would like to end what Blaženka has already mentioned, and it is the question of equal access. Since equal access into education came or was even visible in the distance education and in the coronavirus crisis. And I think we all as representatives of education policy should think it out, should work it out, and should concentrate on it, because we see it more clear where the barriers already are. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Vice Minister Velčovský. I congratulate you on great feedback you gathered from the schools, and in different activities you organized in Czech Republic. I recognize some solutions we already used in Croatia as well, especially TV broadcast for younger students. So in the aftermath of the COVID-19, it will be interesting to analyze post-crisis developments in education and training, which are influenced by emergency actions taken during the pandemic, as our colleagues already said. Perhaps we can look at this crisis as an opportunity to mainstream on a broader scale some of the new models of learning and teaching. Minister Blanquer, do you already foresee whether some of these initiatives may be embedded in education and institutions' policies, such as uptake in blended learning, innovation in students' assessment, development of personalized learning? What are positive and negative sides of the fast digital transformation of schools, as well as teaching and learning process?
Thank you very much, Lidija, and thank you, Blaženka, again for this new meeting. And I joined to our friend Václav to congratulate you for your presidency. It was you have been a marvelous president during those very special events. You took a lot of initiatives, and it was very good to have those ways to communicate among all of us. It was very, very well done. And so thank you very much. And I hope that we will be able to be at this highness in the future. But thank you so much, and thanks to all of you. Good morning to everybody. I've been very interested by what has been said until now, and I could have said more or less the same. That's why it's interesting to go ahead and to see what else can be said. Especially, I do agree with what Anna said about the very special impact on each student. I mean that we have seen that some students have benefited from the circumstances. In general, we think that it has developed inequalities, because the ones who have most benefited are the ones with the best family background, but not in all the cases. For example, I see that some very poor children, sometimes without parents in special houses, have benefited of the experience because they have problems with living with the others in classrooms. So the fact of having a personalized approach through distance learning was good for them. Of course, it's a minority, so we just have to think that it says something to us about personalization of the journey of each one. We knew that before, of course, but it's kind of proof. So, and it's not only a question of rich and poor, it's also a question of relationship with learning and relationship with the others. Of course, the conclusions must be complex. There is not something simple to say about that, but I think that it allows us to go to more personalization and also to find ways to have solutions for the children who have problems with going to school, with all the questions with that. So I think that they have to go to school, of course, but maybe we can change some ways of learning and some ways of interacting in the group. Another lesson was, and a bit in the same way, was the success of the teachers with an experience on flipped classrooms, because those teachers were used to give to their pupils some contents and to give to those pupils contents and then to work with them from this content. And this is one of the best methods during the distance learning period. So we see that this kind of preparation, this kind of ways of working has been very useful. Maybe this will have an impact on our ways to think about the time and the space of the child and the pupils in general, because maybe in the future we would be able to organize in a different way the space in the school. For example, we can have more places where with computers and with possibilities to see some courses and then to have exercise with the professors, things like that. And also it has an impact on our way to think about the time of the child, because I think that it's good for the child to be at school, but to make maybe more sport, to have more cultural activities, and to mix in a more personalized way different activities. So that has an impact on our way to see the space and the time of the pupil. We will organize in autumn a special event in Poitiers. We call Poitiers Capitale de l'Éducation, our main city for education, because we have in Poitiers some institutions like the CNED, which is our institution for distance learning, national distance learning, and also something named Canopé, which is our institution to create contents for the teachers. And also in Poitiers, we have the institutions of training of our responsibles of education, of our for professors and heads of schools. So this in Poitiers we will organize in November with, of course, European friends, a kind of retext of what has been done in terms of distance learning and how we can use in a good way the digital tools, taking into account the good aspects and the bad aspects of what we have seen. For example, within the bad aspects, we have the problem of addiction with screens, which is a real problem, and we don't have to avoid to study this problem in the moment when we are going to make more digital learning approach. So we have to balance all those aspects. So we will think and speak a lot about that to have new progress at a French scale, but maybe we can have this. We can interact at an European scale about all that. During the crisis, we had 3 public policies that now can have an impact on our future public policies. The first one was named Ma classe à la maison, My Class at Home. So it's a digital platform set up by our national agency that I mentioned, the CNED. 2.5 million of users have benefited from this initiative, and the platform offered a virtual classroom tool which helps to keep the class in a group by creating a time in the day when all the pupils were able to go together and to discuss. The interest of this system is twofold. It means that pupils are not as isolated, and it enables teachers to advise pupils on the topics they need to focus on. But it has another good consequence, because it is coherent with the rules of the European Union in terms of protection of data, which is not the case of the private tools. So we are going to have an evolution of this platform. But one of the good things of this platform is that, as we have national pedagogical programs in France, it gives a framework, a common framework for the pupils of the same age. A second public policy was what we called Nation Apprenante, Learning Nation. It means that we developed in a very quick manner new TV programs and new radio programs and new internet programs and new written programs in the newspapers and in different medias. And some of them were very successful. In one of the TV, there was a very good audience, and everybody underlined the good quality of those programs. So it was a kind of reinvention of school at TV, which maybe in the past seemed quite old-fashioned, but in reality there is new ways of doing that, and now it is fashionable. And I think that we can use those programs in the future to organize things, even in the school, of course. When I spoke before about the fact of having dedicated classes to some contents, we can use this kind of programs in this contents, I think. At least we have to consider that. Third, we organized for this summer, in July and August, what we call Vacances Apprenantes, learning holidays. At least 1 million pupils will benefit from academic reinforcement and stimulating enrichment activities this summer. So that it means that thousands of primary and secondary schools will remain open in July and August. Of course, it's not to make classical classrooms, it's to make sport, to play, to be happy. But we are supposed to be happy even in the rest of the year, and also to have educative activities during these moments. So this will have an impact on our public policies of the future, because the idea is to have a systemic vision of the time of the pupil, not only the school time, but also the time of sports, culture, games, especially for disadvantaged children, to give them more opportunities to be out of their home and to interact with the others in a good way. So that's why we are going to make experiences in that sense from next September to develop extrascholar activities. So I think I have to conclude. Of course, there is a lot of things to say about all that, but I think that we have had during this crisis new public policies, and those public policies are not going to dead with the end of the crisis, but to have new consequences, and we are shaping that right now with the trade unions, with the actors of the systems, to be able to have a new step, not only in digital learning, but also in our philosophy of space and time of the pupil.
Thank you, Minister Blanquer. I agree with you that I think most of the countries recognize the importance of having national platforms for learning and teaching, and that organizing personalized learning is quite difficult. For Croatia, it would mean organizing different solutions for almost 500,000 students. Director General Christophidou, we heard several examples from our countries, but does the European Commission foresee, well, better said, which impact of digital transformation European Commission sees as a part of our new normal in education? Would you be so kind to unmute your microphone?
I'm trying.
Okay.
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ministers. It's an honor to be with you. The first thing I would like to say is that maybe the Croatian presidency didn't have an expected agenda, but was certainly an impressive presidency. I sat in the listening room of each and every one of your informal meetings, and I must say that this was impressive to see how you were sharing and learning from each other, and we learned a lot from you at the European Commission, I can assure you. Now, this crisis has changed us, has changed our social behavior and our working habits. The field of education has not been spared. On the contrary, it is one of the most badly affected. It is clear that the changes that had to be implemented overnight to ensure continuity of teaching and learning will have medium and long-term impact. They will have to be reflected in our policies for learning in the digital world, teacher education and training, and also equity. And I think several of you spoke of this aspect of equity. In the short term, it is possible that in a number of countries, the next school year will start with a combination of in-school learning and distance learning, as you've already indicated, due to the safety measures and the lack of space in school buildings in order to respect the social distancing rules. In this context, we need to take the best out of distance learning and in-school face-to-face learning. How to organize blended learning depends, of course, on the age, competences, and autonomy of learners. However, if done well, it allows for more individualized approaches. It can increase the motivation, the independence, and agency of learners. Still, it requires careful planning and follow-up. Both teachers and families need access to the right knowledge and skills to organize this in the best interest of the learners. The Commission has prepared a guidance document on this, highlighting the main points to be considered. For the longer term, the Commission will present 2 key initiatives in the area of education and training this autumn: the updated Digital Education Action Plan and a communication on the development of the European education area. Our new Digital Education Action Plan will support education systems and institutions to develop their digital capabilities, including not only infrastructure and equipment, but also the purposeful integration of digital technologies in the education process and teacher professional learning. On that front, we already have a free online tool, the Selfie, that helps schools understand how they use technology, plan for an improvement and monitoring of progress. The tool has already been used by 630,000 school leaders, teachers, and students. We have also started work on a self-reflection tool for teachers, Selfie for Teachers, which we will pilot over the coming months. This new tool will allow teachers to identify their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to digital skills and help them see what kind of training or peer support they need to improve. The European education area now will provide long-term support for teachers' professional development and address the challenges of the profession. As part of that, we are proposing a European agenda for teachers. We will address key issues such as ensuring educational equity and education for sustainable development. Let me mention a couple of other key initiatives. In November this year, we plan to publish the Education and Training Progress Report that puts a special emphasis on teaching and learning in the digital age. It will focus on the contribution of education to the digital transition, selected by President von der Leyen as one of the top priorities of this Commission. We also ensure that education challenges are well reflected in the European semester process, where the most important structural challenges for Europe's economic and social well-being are addressed. The semester spring package, adopted just in May, reconfirmed that education and skills have a key role to play in crisis response and recovery. This year, 23 member states received a country-specific recommendation in relation to education or skills. Many of these recommendations focus on digital learning, of course. Others highlight the importance of equal access to quality education, drawing attention to the risk of deepening inequalities as a result of the pandemic. This has emerged as a key challenge in many countries. The European semester country reports show a growing recognition at the highest political level of the importance of teachers in equipping young people with the skills they need to thrive in the 21st century. According to our analysis, 18 member states are confronted with shortages of qualified teachers, at least for certain subjects. This is most often linked to the low attractiveness of the teaching profession, coupled with an aging teacher population. There's a lot of work to do in this field. Finally, as you know, the Commission has put forward an ambitious recovery plan with a budget of 750 billion called the Next Generation EU. I would like to encourage all member states to make use of the new funding instruments to support education reforms so that we can all get stronger out of this current crisis. We are ready to support you in this endeavor. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Christophidou. I must say that Digital Education Action Plan has a perfect timing. Different stakeholders will definitely have to say something, either from students, parents, teachers, policymakers' perspective about it as well. And I have to say that selfie is already in use in Croatia too. We are using it as a part of our project for raising digital competencies of our teachers in schools. So when it comes to reforms and innovation, a focus is often on changing curricula in order to become more relevant to what students will be exposed to into 21st century. This, of course, needs to be coupled with adequate pedagogies. With a recent shift to digital education provoked with the COVID-19 crisis, there was no really time to properly rethink the pedagogy. Instead, we had to quickly decide on the way forward and to introduce some emergency responses to secure, as much as possible, undisrupted education. Different countries had different starting points with regards to their readiness to respond, but it was a steep learning curve for everyone. Vice Minister Velčovský, do you believe this emergency response will accelerate introducing new forms of pedagogy? And what do you see as the potentially emerging new teaching and learning styles?
Well, thank you very much for this very interesting and very important question, which is quite hard to answer. You know, before 30 years after the Velvet Revolution, we all thought that we are building an education for the stable and stabilized world, that we are building something which will remain, which will be stable, which will be here for the next generation. However, in the last 15 years, we had to use to instability caused, for example, by terrorism, but nowadays caused by the nature and by the coronavirus and via hygienic situation. It means emergency situation will become a part of education policy. This is something which we have not anticipated 20 or 30 years ago. And this is something which we have to somehow put into the preparation of the teachers. Because the role of the teachers is unquestionable, is irreplaceable by any other online tools. And the education will be still an all the time process between pedagogue and between the pupil. And now we are discussing the way of the interaction. However, behind all these, let's say, e-learnings and blended learnings and webinars, there is still this person of pedagogue. And this pedagogue should be prepared for this unprecedented situation. Therefore, we are trying, the Czech Republic, to focus now on the pre-graduate education of teachers. We are trying to cooperate very closely, not only with the pedagogical faculties, but with all the faculties which are preparing teachers. It means for the teachers in the high schools or for the future teachers in the high schools as well. This unprecedented situation has, I would like to strengthen 4 implications. One implication is to curricula. Of course, we should discuss what is necessary to be learned. We should somehow aerate the curricula. It means make it more airily, more fluently, more, I would like to use the aphorism, teach less to learn more. And this is something which we are now discussing very hardly. How less should we teach to guarantee that the pupil learns more? The second implication is the assessment. Again, the future teachers should be fully okay and should understand what formative assessment is. Again, this is something what is already going on at schools. However, we should make sure that the formative assessment will be integrated part of the pedagogical process. And this is a big challenge, to be frank, because formative assessment is very demanding on teachers. It's not so easy as just to take marks and from 1 to 5. Yeah. The third implication are the pupils with specific educational needs. Of course, in the situation of presence education, the teachers know how to tackle them, how to work with them, how to accommodate the education process to these specific needs. However, in the digital era, this is something very new, and we should somehow discuss not only the impact of digital education on the pupils, but on the variety of pupils, on their needs, on, let's say, huge amount of specific needs. And the fourth question is the social role of education. Again, the role of teachers, which they have in the education process, which was somehow not accented very well, because sometimes teachers and parents, even parents, are tending to focus only on curriculum and focus only on content of education. And we need to explain that the content of education is only one function of different range of function of education of schools we have. And this is the role which we should stress. However, we should understand as well that there is not one size fits all. It is not in the present education, it is not in the distance education. It means to have an idea that we have only one solution that will cover all schools and all needs and all subjects is very utopistic and probably will not work. Therefore, we should need a variety of tools, and we should learn, the teachers and the future teachers, how to work with the variety of tools. Let me end with a thesis which Blaženka has mentioned, teach as you preach. I think it's not possible to tell these thesis or this aphorism in the Czech, since we are the most atheistic country of the European Union. But I would focus on teach as you live. Teach as demands you have on your living conditions. Teach as you have on the image of the society you need to build. Teach as a picture of the future. And this is something, this foreseeing and this transmission of the values, what we are somehow and sometimes lacking in the pedagogical process. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Minister Velčovský. Being a teacher always means that you have to be a role model for your students. So whatever you do, either publicly, either privately, will have mirroring on your everyday teaching in school as well. But around the EU, in many member states, the teaching profession seems to have lost some of its attractiveness, and many member states are facing teacher shortages, especially in STEM area. In recognizing the complexity of the issue, education policymakers are developing measures to support existing teachers and to attract and hire new, highly qualified teachers. Minister Ekström, what can be done in order to attract new generation to teaching and to retain teachers in the profession? What measures might be beneficial to cater for teachers' well-being?
Well, thank you very much, and once again, thank you for this very interesting conference. We have a huge lack of teachers, and this is something that I know that I share, this problem I share with colleagues all over Europe and really all over the world. And you mentioned very rightly STEM, but we see a shortage in virtually every area. Especially Swedish for newcomers is a part of the Swedish subject where we have a huge shortage. So we could really welcome teachers in almost all. Thoughts on this very interesting topic. To start with, I think another problem I share with all of you is that our labor markets are in a very troublesome situation. And we see in front of us a very big need for teachers also in adult education. But on the other hand, we see a possibility to open up the teaching profession for new teachers. And this will be tricky because we don't want to lower the standards, but we want to make it easier for older persons to enter the teaching profession. So we are currently discussing how to open up teachers' education as a new, to open up a new possibility, or rather an old possibility that is already there, but which we would like to expand, namely to have a possibility for people with other kinds of education to become teachers later in life. And actually, this is something we have been opening up for a few years, and this new way to become a teacher with a shorter teacher program is often more attractive to people than the normal teacher's education. So this is an area where we are currently looking into, and where I can see big opportunities, because we are very used to talking about teachers when we talk about educating the youth. But honestly, if we look at Europe, the European labor markets in a few years' time, we will have a huge need of teachers for adult education. Adult education for those who are newly unemployed, adult education for all the young people who are entering the labor market and finding it very difficult to have a job, and we all want to avoid them being scarred by unemployment early in their working life. And this is an experience we have from for instance, different crises, that it's very negative for young people to enter the labor market with a scar of unemployment early in the working life. And third, but not least, all from the Swedish perspective, all those who entered the Swedish labor market in 2015, when we had a huge migration into Sweden, Germany, and many other European countries, we still have work to be done in order to make sure that we have a good adult education to make it possible for large groups to enter the labor market. So we have lots of work to do. But all the things we do will of course be totally dependent on the attractiveness of the teaching profession. We can't do anything if the teaching profession is not considered attractive by those who could enter the teaching profession. And I think that we have a fantastic opportunity here. I would argue that we have never had such a wave of love for schools as we have today in Europe. When schools have been closed down, or as in Sweden, when we have kept the schools open with huge efforts, it's very evident that pupils, parents, teachers, citizens love the idea of having a school. I think it was it Jean-Michel who mentioned all the parents who have been at home trying to homeschool their children. Well, if there's any time in history when all these parents realize how hard the teaching profession is, it's now, and how important it is. So I think we have a fantastic opportunity to not only talk about the attractiveness of the teaching profession, but also show everyone the importance of the teaching profession. And if we can't do that now, we will never be able to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. I must read a comment from our audience. This is such a supportive event to all teachers, from a colleague from Greece. So, what is the situation in France, Minister Blanquer? What do you think? How could we attract teachers for the future?
Thank you very much. So again, I do agree very much with what Anna said just now, and I could say the same. But maybe to add some things. First, I think it's very important to acknowledge that this is a key question worldwide, and thank you very much to stress on this question, because in general it is viewed as a national question or a local question. It is a European and even an international question, because if our societies manage to put the teacher at the center of their life, of their collective life, it will mean that we put knowledge at the center of our collective life. And in most of the countries in the world, there is a lack of prestige of the function of teacher. And we have to work all together, not only from a material point of view, and we have to work for best wages and best salaries for teachers, but also for the image of teachers in cinema, in all the public discourses about teachers. So the way we speak about teachers in the civilization of the future, for me, is a key question. And to show that it is something important from the European presidency and from the UNESCO and the old international structures is, for me, a key question, because it is a question for the future of the humanity. If the function of professor is not something of the past. There is not a golden past with a teacher at the center of the classroom and so on and so forth. There must be a golden future with the professor at the center of our society. Of course, with new ways of doing things, but the human factor is key. That's why it's important when at the same time we speak about digital tools and robots and things like that, which is very important, to say at the same time that in this world with more digital tools, we need even more the human factor, which means the professor. So I think it's a key question. And of course, the alliance between the professor and the parents is also a key question. So I think that it's important that at a European scale, we put forward this question. So in France, we have different things to do. I am engaged in a strong negotiation with trade unions to have better salaries in the future, especially for the youngest, because in France you have quite a good salary at the end of your career, but not at the beginning, and even at the middle of the career, it's not sufficient. So we have to make efforts in that direction. But the discussion is not only about salaries; it's also about all the things around the function. So, for example, the question of health, the question of security, the question of all the social things we can do around the teachers. For example, having a good house close to the schools, especially when you are in suburbs and places where it's expensive and difficult to have a house or an apartment. All the aspects of a good life for the teachers. So we work on that to have first results for the next year, and to have a long-term vision about the opportunity to be professors. It is very important to underline what has been said by you before, which is a question of second career, because it's also important to open the way for professors to have a second career within our educational system and out of the educational system, depending on their willings, and also to have second career from people in the private and the public sectors able to become professor very often at the age of 40 or 45. We have this phenomenon in France, but I think in other countries, of people willing to be professor because it makes more sense in their life. This new phenomenon is a very good phenomenon, and we have to take it into account in our vision. As you know, our system is quite centralized, with nearly 1 million employees, and so we have to be more. We have a more deconcentration of our vision of human resources, to be less anonymous and more personalized, with a real human resource policy. That's why we developed something named local human resources system, which means that with a new personalized support, advice, information service designed for our professors close to the schools where they work. It means that it will be easier in the future to have someone with whom to speak in the future, to speak about the career, their future, the good things and the bad things that happen in their professional life. So for us, it's very important to make progress in that sense, to be more personalized and so more attractive. Another challenge is, of course, the training of the professors, initial training and continuous training. In terms of initial training, we made the start of a reform through a law that we passed last year, and it means some evolutions of our higher national teacher training colleges within the universities. To speak a little about that, it means that 1/3 at least of the teacher trainers must be practitioners. For me, it's a very important thing to have an important proportion of practitioners among the trainers of the teachers. And also for the future teachers of primary schools, more than half of the time is devoted to core knowledge, because we don't have to forget that to read and to write and mathematics are still very important. And maybe we could have a debate with Václav about what he has said about the fact of lightening the contents. I'm not sure about that, to be frank. Maybe yes, maybe no. I think we have to have a debate about that, because we have this debate, of course, in France, especially with what happened. But I'm always very prudent about this, because we need to give content. We need to learn, but to learn, we have to learn. I think it's very important to don't forget that if they don't manage to read when they are the primary school, if we don't give them strong contents during primary and secondary school, we will develop inequalities and we will develop problems if we forget that. So we have to modernize without forgetting these key questions in schools. And I think that the way we think the training of professors is influenced by this approach. So, of course, there is a lot of more things to say. I think that professional development is a key question. Now, for example, and in relationship with what I just said, we have a reinforcement of this professional development in French and in math, guaranteeing that each teacher has different days of training in 6 years. That's for us a guarantee of having quality for the core knowledge. So we pay a lot of attention to the new dimension of continuous training. That's why one of the institutions I mentioned before, Canopé, will be more and more dedicated to make distance learning with teachers, to give them a lot of content during all the year. So
thank you.
Okay, I conclude. Thank you again for that, and I think that question is maybe the key question if we want a progress of our systems all over Europe.
Okay, thank you, Minister Blanquer. Human factor is definitely the key, but also is a part of European identity and citizenship. Director General Christophidou, what do you consider as European dimension of teaching and how it could be strengthened?
Indeed, the European dimension of teaching lies in the ability and the commitment of teachers and the wider school community to work as safe, tolerant, respectful, and creative learning communities. In this way, they nurture and practice European values. They do so also when they engage in European cooperation projects because they open up to new and different ways of teaching and learning, contributing to the richness of our education systems. Learning each other's language and approaching different cultures is also part of the European dimension. For teachers and trainers, this means working together and learning together with peers across Europe. The Erasmus Plus projects and platforms such as e-twinning are concrete and very effective ways to promote the European dimension in education. They encourage teachers and pupils to create joint projects and work together towards common goals. Teachers joining the e-twinning feel part of the professional community of practice and part of the European project. And they have done this in great numbers during the past months when schools were physically closed. I therefore very much hope that we will have a strengthened Erasmus program as a result of the current negotiations over the EU budget, with a strong school education pillar. Our idea is to boost pupil mobility in school education as soon as the situation allows it again. But we should not forget education and professional development of teachers. We also want to enhance their cooperation with European peers. This is one of the goals of the European education area and the European agenda for teachers that we are currently developing. First of all, it is our ambition to make mobility an integral part of teacher education, both initial and continuous. Many obstacles still have to be overcome: timing, replacement of teachers, or lack of formal recognition of learning abroad. We want to work with member states to develop EU-level guidance, helping to promote mobility of teachers. both in terms of numbers and in the quality of their learning experiences. Secondly, I think that providing opportunities for cooperation between teacher education providers would enhance innovation in this area. To this end, we propose to set up Erasmus teacher academies under the new Erasmus program. These academies would create joint courses or modules, promote mobility and work on common challenges such as digital learning, inclusion, or learning in multicultural settings. Over time, we would expect these teacher academies to develop important communities of practice and networks that contribute to the development of national and European teacher education policies. I think this could really be a flagship initiative of the future European education area, providing a stronger European perspective to the teaching profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Director General Christophidou. I think that time runs very fast when we are in such an interesting discussion and have such an interesting panelists. So thank you all for sharing the news from your countries and institutions with us. For the final parts, we would like to ask you just in 1 minute to say the most important recommendations and conclusions you would like our audience to focus on. We suggest to start from Sweden, go to the Czech Republic, European Commission, France, and end up in Croatia. So, Minister Ekström, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very fruitful discussion. I would like just to pass on to you the fact that our experience when we have had the schools open for children from the age of 15 and below is actually a positive one. In the assessments done by our medical community and by medical communities internationally as well, we have seen that the children and young persons only account for a small proportion of the COVID-19 cases. They have not been a driving force in this pandemic. The pandemic has been terrible, but the children and young people have not been a driving force. And moreover, the Swedish experience is that when we have kept schools open, staff within the preschool and school system, which has remained open, have been found not to have been diagnosed with COVID-19 to a larger extent than those in other professions. This is a very important knowledge to bring with you, and my estimation is that if we have a second wave, I believe that we will leave schools open again, especially for young persons. The younger they are, the more important it is and the more efficient it is to keep schools open. So I would like to end on this in the very sad and tragic spring of 2020, this rather happy note that children are not driving forces in this terrible pandemic, and it's important to make sure that we can see to their future happiness and their future well-being and their present well-being, which is very, very much connected to the possibility of being in school with other children and learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vice Minister Velčovský.
I would like to thank you for an excellent debate and for diverse interpretation and diverse way of thinking. And I think this effect is very positive because we may inspire each other, we may exchange our point of views, and we may move forward. And although in the multiple countries, although in the variety of the school systems, we are still having and building this European education area, which is crucial for our further development and it means our Europeans. I think the message I would like to transmit is that this COVID-19 pandemic was not only crisis, but was as well the challenge. It was a challenge for our education systems, it was a challenge for our parents, it was a challenge for our teachers, it was a challenge for our pupils as well. And in this challenge, I think we all have succeeded. it was based very often on the improvisation because it was unprecedented situation. However, we all saw that we have a good teacher professionals that they are ready to help. They are open to their pupils, they are open to their colleagues. And I think this challenge showed us as well the bottlenecks or the narrow places of our system which we may concentrate on. And I would like to thank for or hope that we will use this identification of the bottlenecks for the further development for the future of all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Minister Blanquer.
Thank you very much again. Maybe three assessments. First, we should develop in the future the interactions between teachers within Europe. And I think that in the context of the new Erasmus Plus, we really have to double or triple the number of future teachers able to go to another European country. So I think this is very concrete and very possible in the new context, and so maybe we can work all together to do so. And in the case of France, I do push this in the reform of our training of professors. Second, maybe having a common doctrine about the percentage of GDP that we consecrate to education. If there is a common strategy between the different European countries to make more spending on education, this will accelerate the new civilization that we want, more ecological, more social, more efficient, more better for our children. So it is difficult to do so at a national scale, but at a European scale, if we have a kind of consensus about that, and it should be the logical conclusion of all the things that have been said about education and about our societies through the coronavirus, I think that would be good. And third, there is a recovery plan, and education must be very important in the recovery plan. So, for example, I suggest that there is a kind of Marshall Plan to help local authorities to rebuild the schools, because we saw that maybe in nearly all the countries there was problems of digital equipment, but also of lavatories and in general of ecological criteria of the buildings. So that could be an important part of the recovery plan. So putting education at the core of our new recovery plan in terms of training teachers or in terms of buildings, that would be a very good signal, and I will be with all of you if there is this kind of orientation in the future. And I think that our president, our Croatian presidency, was very good in that direction, and before there was also very good push, for example, from Finlandia. So I will still push with our German friends and the others in the near future.
Thank you. Director General Christophidou.
Yes, thank you. Ministers have summarized most of the key issues. I would like to keep as a takeaway Anna's comment on the newly found love for teachers in schools. I think this is an important takeaway from this crisis. I'm very much keen to work with you all on finding the lost prestige of the teaching profession, and in that logic also indeed double and triple the mobilities for teachers. I'm with you, Minister Blanquer, on this. And I'm also looking forward to this Czech-French debate on whether lighter content or not. I think this is a fascinating one, and I will be very much looking forward to it. A last word to thank again Blaženka and all the team for a fantastic presidency, for all these precious takeaways Thanks a lot. Congratulations.
Thank you. Minister Divjak.
Thank you, Lidija. But let me first thank Anna, Jean-Michel, Václav, and Themis for all contributions. And let me conclude for the last time as in the name of the presidency. And even though it was a very difficult time to preside the Council of the European Union, I really enjoyed that all of this bring us closer together, and we learn a lot from each other. And that is something we should remember, because sometimes we just think about the European Union or even on a global scale that we are different countries, different traditions, different way of schooling and so on. But when during this crisis, it was obvious that we should work together more, and education is such an area that we really can benefit from working together. At the beginning, I said that if you look at the 3 success factors for success during this distance education that we were, of course, forced to enter, but there are 3 of them. First, this kind of an agile strategic planning and streamlining the process, then the resources for digital transformation like equipment and training and so on, services, central services as well. And the third one, human resources equipped with the digital skills and so on. But if you would like to say what is the number one, that's certainly the teachers. So human resources, and especially teachers that are motivated and that embrace this opportunity to show how creative, innovative they are. So that's for certain. And the last sentence, we really have to build this, use this opportunity for sharing, reusing all sorts of tools and everything that we prepared in different countries, and have this circle of trust on different level, on international level, European level, but also on a school level, that we should put the students and pupils in the center, and then we build a kind of a circle of trust with parents as well, and the teachers, and then that we believe, that we show that we really believe that the education is an answer. So thank you very much, all of you, and I really enjoyed.
Thank you all panelists for being guests on Croatia's presidency conference. And I hope you will enjoy the rest of our program.